Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Rally webinar on getting employee stories from reluctant storytellers. If you hear no or not right now, or even radio silence, then this webinar is definitely for you. I'm Sylvia with Rally Recruitment Marketing, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. Today's webinar is being sponsored by GoodSeeker, and I want to thank them for their partnership and their support of the Rally community and helping us to bring great webinars and resources like these to you. Okay, so let me introduce today's speakers. With me today are Kaitlin Hurley, who is the Employee Experience and Change Specialist at Evans Consulting, Katie Potter, who is the Director of Recruitment Marketing at Aspen Dental, and Erik Ayers, who is the CEO of GoodSeeker. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hello.
Thank you guys so much for being here. And I'm really excited for this webinar today. I know that I'm going to learn a lot, and I know that the folks in the Rally community are going to learn a lot as well, because everyone is dealing with this topic even a little. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Kaitlin, why don't you start first?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Kaitlin Hurley, the Employee Experience and Change Specialist with Evans. Evans Consulting is a boutique management consulting firm. We were founded in 1944, and this year we've reached over 100 employees. We've been growing very quickly. We've hired over 30 people this year alone, which is like double what we did last year. So definitely understand the recruiting marketing perspective of this presentation and webinar. My role specifically is to help Evans be a healthy organization from the employee perspective, which is actually what we do for our clients as well. I am not client facing, but I do a lot of what our consultants do. And just really making sure that we're keeping the employee experience in mind. And we have been collecting stories for way before I joined Evans about 4.5 years ago. So story collecting and story writing is really important at Evans. And so we've learned a lot. I have learned a lot in the last few years about collecting stories and getting stories from reluctant storytellers. So I'm very excited to share some tips that I've learned the hard way and also learn from all of you as well.
Great. I'm really excited to be here. It's great to have someone that is really focused on employee experience speaking at one of our webinars. So I'm looking forward to what you can bring today. So Katie, why don't you go next? Tell us a little bit more about you and Aspen Dental.
Yeah, thank you. So it's actually a pretty exciting time for us right now. We just announced a little over a week ago that we're actually becoming TAG, the Aspen group. So Aspen Dental, that some of you may know, if it's in your community, those practices are remaining the same. But Aspen Dental Management Inc., the sort of parent company, we are becoming TAG, the Aspen group. We're expanding beyond dental to embrace a new vision, which is we're bringing together our other brands, which are Chapter Aesthetic Studios, Well Now Urgent Care, and Clear Choice Implant Centers. And so we're becoming, a more modern healthcare group. And our mission is to bring better healthcare to more people. So that's been the mission since Aspen Dental started over the last 20 years. They've grown from just a few locations to now over 900 across the country. And, we just want to bring healthcare to more people. The model that we operate under is a COE model, which is really kind of amazing in the recruitment marketing area. It means that I get to partner with groups across the company, which has put me in a really good place to be able to get stories and learn more about everything that everyone does, and not just be so siloed. And so I've really enjoyed that. So I have, a group of about 7 people supporting the recruitment marketing initiatives. We hire about 800 dentists a year, over 1,000 hygienists. We have about 12,000 people working for us, and we have about 3,000 open recs at any time. And so for us, given that we are working in patient care, healthcare, trying to bring that to more people, I really felt that we had to focus on our employee stories, and we really had to humanize what we're doing and let people know, like, culturally who we are, what we're doing, and why we do it. So we've been leaning really heavily this year into building our employee content library. And I think that that's like really started to bring a whole new depth and openness and genuine nature to the branding and recruitment marketing that we do.
Fantastic. And it just occurred to me that both of you are representing companies of different sizes. So you're both proof, especially you, Kaitlin, that, recruitment marketing isn't just for large companies, and the need to tell your company's story as an employer and market your employer brand is something that's important for companies of all sizes. So you'll both bring those, unique perspectives to this as well.
Yeah, Katie, you said thousands of recs, and I was like, that puts my 30 whatever to shame. That's not even impressive anymore.
I know, it's funny, whether you're hiring like 1,000 or 30, sometimes the role type itself, just getting one of a specific kind of person with that really unique role type, like skill set, is really hard to do. So like I could hire, maybe 1,000 of, more general skill set, while getting that one is the one that you have to work at. And that's also another reason to have those good employee stories, because then you can try and convince that one special candidate that this is the right place for them.
Great point. Awesome. Well, all right, Erik, welcome to the webinar, but also welcome to the Rally Recruitment Marketing community. And I just want to thank you for supporting the community and introducing us to Kaitlin and Katie and helping to bring this webinar together. But I consider you one of the thought leaders in our space, not only on what it takes to create compelling employee stories, but just the whole operational aspect of building and managing your content library and how to use that really effectively, both internally and externally. So that was my introduction of you, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and also GoodSeeker?
All right, well, Skip, go to the next now. No, I really appreciate you having me today, and I'm excited to learn from what I hear from our guests as well. People can see the slide to get the gist of what GoodSeeker is. I'll just tell you kind of how it came about. I have over 20 years in professional services marketing experience, and I can't pinpoint the date, but at one point I was asked to help take over recruiting to bring a marketing perspective to that. We were hiring a ton of people, and my eyes were opened to the power of employee stories. I tried to collect them manually. It was hard. And when I saw the impact that sharing a behind the scenes story can make on not only an employee, but a candidate who's looking for trust, I knew I had to pursue this mission of building GoodSeeker. So our real mission is look, at the end of the day, heart and soul builds brands. So we need to tell more people stories to bring out the best in work. And I'll add the best in talent too. One of the very unique things about what we've built is this benefit to not only the employee, but the company as well. And there's a lot of synergy there. And last point, reluctance is there. And this is a really well-timed topic. I talk to tons of companies, but I will tell anybody who is kind of thinking about this issue, there are stories, they are there. And so hopefully we can help share some ideas on how to get them. Thanks.
Perfect. All right. So, well, then for those of you who may be new to Rally, we're the largest community of recruitment marketing and employer branding candidate experience professionals. So whether you're in HR or you're in talent acquisition or you're in marketing or communications, if you are using modern marketing strategies to help you attract and engage and recruit talent, then we're the community for you. So we've got a fantastic blog that's contributed by people in our community at rallyrecruitmentmarketing.com. And we produce a virtual conference, which is the highest rated virtual conference in our space and the largest community gathering in our space. It's happening on December 8th. So I really hope that you'll register and join. We also do the Rally Awards. The next one is actually starting, I think, on November 1st. You can start submitting your nominations at rallyawards.com. And we recently launched a new analytics and benchmarking tool for the Rally community to help everyone track and measure and know their effectiveness and prove your value to your stakeholders and to your leadership. So here's what we're going to cover today. we will talk about methods for collecting employee stories that make it easy and comfortable for employees to share their voice by contributing their experiences and their success stories. Overcoming those blockers that can get in the way of employees creating stories, whether they're emotional or logistical blockers. Technologies for discovering, encouraging, fostering employees to be authentic and sharing day-to-day experiences, capturing those moments that happen each and every day across our companies, and advice and best practices for working collaboratively across your team and throughout all of your stakeholders and leadership, because you're going to hear today that this is one of the keys to removing that reluctance. If you have any questions for our amazing lineup of speakers, you can use the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen here from Zoom. And we'll queue those up to answer those at the end. And if there's any assistance that you need during today's webinar, Aaron from the Rally team is there, so you can chat and Aaron will be sure to help. So let's dive in and discuss getting employee stories from reluctant storytellers. And I'm going to turn it over to Erik. So give us some background on the operational challenges that probably a lot of folks in the audience right now are experiencing when it comes to creating employee stories and building that library.
Excellent. Yeah, I've talked to tons of companies, all sizes, all industries over the past couple of years. So this is kind of a little bit in order too of some of the things that we hear most often. Don't be alarmed that there are, well over 10, because there's a lot more in terms of the upside of this. But let's talk about some of these challenges. The first is just manual back and forth. It's time consuming, pursuing people. I remember one day in my prior life, literally having to knock on doors, and just people hearing the word stories sometimes freaked them out and they shut the door. So, it's hard. It's a time consuming effort. At least it has been in the past. There's this need to and desire to keep content fresh. How long is one story good for? And if you need to keep it constantly fresh, how do you systemize it? So that's been a challenge that I hear a lot. Employees don't know what to say. I think we'll talk about this later. That's a big one. And, answer there, you need to tell them. And there's some really creative ways to do that. A lot of times whether it's the marketer or the recruitment marketing professional, just figuring out who to ask, like who inside the organization, wants to share a story. Sometimes it's not who you expect, or sometimes the people you expect are not there for you. So that is a little bit daunting to some. And then, with respect to stories, at the end of the day, content is shared internally first. If you're moving towards sharing externally, this becomes even perhaps a bigger issue. But, giving fair visibility to the people who are in stories. I've heard things in the past where people were reluctant because it was like the same people getting mentioned all the time in content. And it tends to cause people to kind of retract a bit. So that's a big issue. And I think now, with the need to really tell your diversity story, this is even a bigger thing to think about and a big opportunity to solve. So getting diversity from creators, right? So if you're hiring a bunch of people from the accounting team, how do you get stories from accountants? I have experience with that. It's a challenge, but again, I can tell you that content's there. Leadership often doesn't see the value, so you got to sell it to them and tell them why. People forget details. This is just human nature. We forget what happened yesterday. So if we wait too long to try to capture a story, it goes pop, it goes poof. I'll skip a couple of these. I'll jump down to actually the what's in it for me is a big one. So from the employee perspective, what is the benefit of sharing a story? There's a whole webinar on that, but certainly in the day and age around talent mobility, it's important to do that. Getting approvals from people. I think Kaitlin mentioned that just earlier. The need, and depending upon your organization, how you're rolling things out. Certainly with respect to sharing socially, just getting approvals sometimes can be hard. And then lastly, they're just, for other departments to leverage the content, sometimes that it's unclear how to do that. And in order for somebody to make an investment in employee stories, it kind of requires a sell job internally. So I'll pause there. There's a lot there, but there's more upside.
So here's the upside.
Yeah, look, reinforcing. I think we're tracking over 40. There are over 40 anonymous employer review sites now. Companies, you have to take control of your story, right? You can't fake it, but there are a lot of great companies out there. There's a lot of good stuff that happens behind the scenes, and you have to own it because your brand will own you if you don't. So I put that as the first and foremost. The review sites, people are forming their impression of you well before they ever talk to somebody. So you need to get the story out. Certainly if you're capturing a volume of stories across different departments, that content is really invaluable to personalize that candidate journey for outreach. Great to share with talent networks. The way people are moving around these days, they're hot one day and cold the next. How can you share something something other than, hey, we're hiring, or here's an open position, like basically show them what's good behind the glass door on a continuous basis. That's what I like to say. You can introduce teams and communities, enable your ambassadors to do more for you, right? So, individuals who want to help need content, so you can really fire them up with employee stories, getting referrals, around diversity, equity, inclusion, and CSR. It's important to share success and the positive impact of that, and stories from employees can do a ton there. And that's internal and external, we see. On the retention side, it's really about connecting them to core values. One of the ones I'll jump down to kind of number 4 here. One of the things that I'm always excited to hear about is when a leader in an organization discovers somebody who they had no idea wants to be an ambassador, who has a story to share and wants to be part of that. It could be an intern. And, unless you have transparency in the organization, and stories can really help with that, you miss those people. So by activating an employee story program, you're getting more visibility. And lastly, on personalizing onboarding, I think this is a huge benefit to, I heard Kaitlin, you mentioned this ahead of the call, the idea of onboarding starting well before somebody ever checks into Zoom or, walks in the door. Sharing stories to give them clarity on your values and how people behave inside the organization helps them be successful faster. And so I think it's really key for personalizing onboarding.
And what a lot of the things that you just described, Erik, it's almost like stories are this connector between recruiting and HR, what you want to do to market your company, and you want employees to contribute so that you can be able to externalize the company culture, but they're also helping to grow and feed and evolve that company culture. So it's really interesting that the impact that the people in our community can have internally just by trying to create a more organized and a more thoughtful system for creating employees, and sourcing employee stories. So we're going to share that today, and we're going to have this internal and external view as we talk about this topic. And so actually, before we go, I just saw that there was a comment, and I don't know, Katie, if you happen to see that in chat, but there was someone who is listening in right now who started their career as an office manager at one of the Aspen dental locations. I love that.
I responded that it was great. Yep.
So welcome. That's fantastic. All right. So let's discuss the first blocker to gaining employee participation in your storytelling program. And that's all around communications. So Kaitlin, why don't you share with us how you've handled this challenge? And then Katie, it would be great to hear your tips as well.
Yeah. So My tips when we first started collecting stories, or I should say when I kind of joined the picture, because Evans has been collecting stories for however long we've been around, so many, many years, but used to all be an email. And this was before we had Teams too. So we literally hundreds and hundreds of emails. And that one email that's asking for stories is just bound to get lost, right? And so what was nice was when we transitioned to using GoodSeeker, it was in its own platform. So that request didn't get missed. The stories had a home, which is really nice because the stories were also submitted in email. It just kind of became a hassle to track. It was difficult for everybody. So my first tip for all of you is make it as easy as possible. Reduce that barrier for people where it is easy for people and that people want to submit. We collect stories monthly. We do a monthly call for stories called Celebrations of Success, which is tied to our values. And one of the barriers is like people didn't know our values. And so they would not submit stories because they didn't know where to find them. And the nice thing, which you see here in this picture, is that GoodSeeker has a place where you can create tags that when an employee is authoring a story, those values are right there, and they can just click the tags that they think are associated with the stories or the behaviors that are modeled within the story. So again, making it really easy for employees. And also, one of the barriers that we felt when we were first implementing GoodSeeker is people were like, oh, not one more password to remember. And thankfully, I have a really great relationship with Erik that we were able to implement a single sign-on feature so that employees did not have to remember one more password, and they could just use their Office 365 account information to log in. So make it super, super easy. The other thing as far as getting kind of collaboration with it is tie it to the big picture. There's always like the big why with a capital W. But it also has to be individual. So Erik, you mentioned like what's in it for me. Like there has to be, and with any sort of change management efforts, whether it's implementing a story collection tool or something different, you have to focus on the individual impact and why that specific person should care. And the more immediate the benefit, the better. So if the benefit's like a year out, they're not going to care nearly as much as if they get a benefit as soon as they use the tool. So again, wanting to incentivize that behavior. So we'll talk more about rewards and recognition later, so I won't tie on that too much here, but more coming on that. And then we also give employees ownership. So, I mean, obviously the employees are the ones actually authoring the stories, but we also share the stories in staff meetings. We used to, when we were smaller, just read all the stories in staff meetings, and that is no longer a scalable approach. So what we do in order to give employees more ownership is there's a like feature in GoodSeeker. So once the deadline ends for people submitting stories, we ask people to go in and use the like feature as a voting mechanism. And so we are able to kind of see which stories have the most votes. We ask the people that have been featured in the story if they're okay with us sharing that in the staff meeting to reinforce those behaviors. And that ownership really, I think, helps to get a little bit more buy-in and commitment from our employees. So those are some tips to just start off.
Great.
So I think I can really sort of piggyback right off of what you were saying about making it accessible and easy to use. For us in particular, we're working in clinical settings, right? Most of our, employees in the Aspen dental practices are providing patient care. So they're not sitting behind a computer. They're not necessarily checking email on a real regular basis. So I wanted to reach them where they are, which is on their mobile devices. So we implemented with GoodSeeker the ability to text in your story so that somebody who's running around providing patient care can pull their phone out and, participate rather easily in the communication channels that they're already using. So that's pretty powerful there. Just trying to find, like you said, the SSO is really important, not having them sign into yet another system, having to do another password, making sure that everything we're using is mobile ready and mobile first so that they can do everything from their phone on the go. So that's definitely, I would say, one of my number one suggestions is to make sure that you are tailoring your communication plan to the channels that they're already in. And the other thing for requesting stories is kind of like, where are you surfacing them from? And where can you kind of drop in reminders that you're looking for stories? So we have a recognition tool. A lot of companies have that, where you can kind of send a shout out thank you to somebody who did something nice for you. We have emails that go out like summarizing that on a weekly basis. So we mine through those and we find people who were having a really good week. And then we reach out to them and we say like, hey, would you like to tell your story to us about, what you were thanking this person for? We also like to take our stories and have leadership feature them. So our chief operating officer, our CEO, our CHRO, they'll send out, company-wide emails talking about a story. Sometimes it's a video even where they read someone's story. So we really try and use the stories that we are getting in different mediums so that it reaches more people and lets them know that, like, yes, we are serious about our stories. Yes, we do want them from you because we are going to use them. And then one of the other things that I think is going to, we'll talk about a little bit more later as well, is that we've started publishing our stories and dropping physical copies into our offices. Again, the people in our offices are super busy. So I'm also taking things outside of technology and going with the print medium and putting something that they can pick up in the break room and look through. Again, just trying to meet people where they are when you're requesting the story.
That's a great idea. I love that. Awesome. All right. So communications, I think we got some really great pro tips from the two of you there. The next blocker that we wanted to talk through is that employees are worried that they'll say something wrong or that's not allowed. And so, Katie, share with us how you've addressed this challenge. And then Erik, I know that you've got some pro tips for getting leadership to buy in and help overcome this particular blocker.
Absolutely. So when I came on board, there was a culture already of storytelling. And I think this ties back a little bit to what Erik said with wanting to gain visibility for other people across the organization. So we'd been telling stories, but I think we had been focusing on certain kinds of stories or certain groups within the organization. And so we really started to branch out to everyone. And one of the things we put into place to help with reluctant storytellers is a coach. So I have Gloria Blass on my team. She's amazing. And one of her primary focuses in her role is to coach people through this process. She is a storytelling coach. So she goes through our resources for identifying potential storytellers, and then she reaches out to them. It's all personal. Another thing about reaching people where they are, for Gloria, she finds out as best she can what their preferred communication channel is. So should she shoot them a text message at night? Should she send them an email? Should she call them directly? So whichever that preferred method is, she reaches out to them and then she schedules some time to walk them through it. And that's showing them how to use our tools, talking about the questions we'd like them to answer, teasing those stories out of those people and letting them know that their story is meaningful and powerful and we do want them to tell it. And they don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing because, we're asking a very specific question and they know what they're talking about. They know their story. And so she really works to build these libraries. And she just started in May. It's her first job out of college here and has been amazing. She's been teasing hundreds of stories out of our employees. And so she has a whole set schedule on how she reaches out to people, how she follows up to them, a working spreadsheet. And that's been hugely impactful for us. I mean, we were already getting stories between me and the comms team, but putting this coaching process in place, we're now getting like really consistent flow on stories. Like every single week, our library is just building. So it's been great. And she's such a kind person and really wants to hear people's stories. So it was excellent fit for her personality too, which I think puts people at ease when they're talking to her.
I love this idea of the story coach and that being part of our role in recruitment marketing and employer branding. So, it's like you have someone who is coming from recruiting, who is giving you permission to tell your story and helping you through that process. And Erik, I know that this culture of permission to be able to talk about your experience at work, in your view, comes from the top, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, top and bottom. Yeah, I think there's especially now, there's a real kind of expectation that I think leaders enable the organization from the bottom up to have a voice. And yes, you have to set the tone, but people at all levels can set tone inside an organization, especially when we're very decentralized, a hybrid workplace. It's shaking things up. Traditional operating models of top down are getting more challenging. But there are some kind of rules. And if I could just share one thing before I forget, and we'll get it on record on the webinar. There's a really good exercise that you can do, going back a few slides, don't change it, but like finding stories, like finding story leads. And I would encourage everybody to map out all of the existing processes in your organization that spit out content. Think process around collecting case studies. Think process related to project closeouts or project reporting, even recognition, as Gavin said, recognition programs. All of those things generate content, and they're usually used for one purpose. But if somebody with another set of eyes, one, you got to know all those things that exist. But with somebody with another set of eyes looks at it, they often see something else, right? The story of X to somebody else is the story of Y. And if they can tie that to a value, you already have a story. And that's my point number 2 here. So I just wanted to say, I think that's a good actual exercise to go through. Top down, you definitely, as marketers, recruitment marketing and HR, I've talked to tons of CEOs, some get it, some don't. The ones that tend to get it the fastest make a direct connection between reputation, trust, and growing the organization. So it's really important to make sure that's clear to get the buy-in from the very beginning. The other thing that I found very helpful is, think of a story not as this intangible thing. Like, think of it as an asset, right? Even the CFO will understand this, right? So you're already doing the work. Things are already happening. Like, moments of your values in action happen every day. You're not making it up. And so if you can turn them into a document, to a page, just they're assets. And when that asset can be utilized for recruiting or onboarding, it's kind of like a gold mine. Now, you can avoid it or not pay attention to it and miss it. But if you can sell it as an asset you already have, you just need to take advantage of, that tends to get leaders excited. A big one is removing this fear of it's not big enough. And I would say this is a huge issue, in my opinion. Employees have this, if you've done research on it, they fear their thing that they're doing is not important enough or worthy enough to be shared. Not everybody saves the day, not everybody's employee of the month, but what we take home is the small wins, right? We take home the small things, the progress, the accomplishments. And it takes leaders kind of acknowledging that. And in many respects, I would say not lowering the bar, but making it clear that small things matter and that they want to hear those things, because those things build up and they make a big impact. I think if you can get leaders kind of what I call breaking the ice by sharing their own examples of small things they see that in the form of a story, it can go a long way. They definitely need to be supportive. And that could be as simple as honestly just commenting on stories, inside a platform, liking it. I mean, you'd be shocked at the employee says, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that person was even paying attention."
Right.
Like, it's that small of a thing sometimes that leaders can do to set the tone. And then the last point I would say is, leaders need to not think it's silly, right? When you're generating stories that are coming from the bottom up, it's transparency. You're getting visibility to things, you're learning about ideas, and it's a gold mine. So they can't ignore it. It can't just be lip service. They actually have to read the content and even act on it. I think in a perfect world, all those things are happening. If you can get one of them going in your direction, you're definitely going in the right direction.
Great points. Awesome. Okay, I know we've got more to share with you guys. So the third blocker that we want to discuss is employees' hesitation to being seen publicly. And in some cases, that's within the organization. In other cases, it's like publicly actually on social media. And I've seen this myself at companies that I worked at. So let's go to Kaitlin and Katie. Share with us your pro tips for overcoming this blocker.
Yeah. So first, I'll just say, I think the number one thing is approach this with empathy, because there are sometimes very personal and private reasons that people don't want to be on social media or don't want their stories shared. So just meet people where they are and respect like when it's a hard no, like just go with it. The other thing is, again, back to that impact piece, like share why you want to share them. If people don't want it to be shared publicly, like maybe it's just because they don't see the value in it and they don't want to waste people's time, or they don't want to be embarrassed by like this small thing being shared, right, Erik? Like not feeling like it's big enough, but reinforce that it is valuable and it is going to have an impact. The other thing is, if you're using a tool, make sure people are aware of the privacy settings. So if you have somebody who is okay with their story being shared internally, but maybe don't want their name shared externally, in GoodSeeker, there are options to be able to do that. So depending on what their comfort level is with things being shared outside of the company, they have different options and different settings. So just making sure that people know what those options are and are trained on the tool. And then the last thing I have here is just build trust. Like, ask permission. There are ways in the tools to kind of recommend that your story be public, but especially if they're new to the tool, they may not have realized that they clicked that button or whatever. So I always just double check if people are okay with being spotlighted in the staff meeting, because some people don't want to be in the spotlight, or if they're okay, like, their settings said they are okay with it being shared publicly, but let me just reach out and double check that they really are okay with it. And so, build that trust, train on the tool and the settings, help them see the impact, and again, meet them where they are and approach the situation with empathy if they really don't want it to be shared publicly.
For me, the tip I give, is that we work in a healthcare environment and we provide patient care. And sometimes folks get really excited about the care they provided to someone and the difference that they made in that patient's life. And you just have to be very careful about the information you share, because it's, protected health information. So I always say, keep an eye on that, make sure that, you're encouraging ways of telling stories without identifying people. And then, for other companies that might be, confidential information or things like that you have to watch out for. But that's really just my watch out when you want to tell patient stories, is make sure that you have the proper procedures in place to be able to do that. And that you have the permission of everyone that's being featured in the story before you do any sharing.
Yeah, both of those points that you guys made are really important. I think the trust comes in them trusting that you have a system and the processes to actually fulfill their wishes. If it's just happening in email, this is where things can go badly wrong. So, Erik, what are some of the things that you can recommend here?
Yeah, I just make one point. It's kind of an observation that was an aha for me a while ago, which was, obviously you have an admin, and I call it a story steward. I don't like the term admin, but and now I love the term coach. But sometimes employees are just nervous that it goes back to is my thing good enough? And the approval process is sometimes a safety net. And so I think taking that role with care, and that, if somebody publishes a story, obviously in our product, nothing's public without it being approved. But don't think of it as a gate to necessarily always prevent, but think of it as a safety net to be helpful to the author. Take a look at it, make a suggestion. It's okay. They can take your suggestion or not, but I think it's in the spirit of being a coach that we want to have controls. not to control people, but to enable them. And I was hearing from junior people inside organizations that was their concern. It wasn't necessarily that they didn't want their story to be public, because they're trying to build their personal brand too. Let's face it. They just want to make sure it's good. And so it was actually a benefit to have the control for that reason and not the other. So it's interesting.
Great points. All right. Our fourth and final blocker is that employees are just busy. They're unmotivated, or maybe they're not sure how participating even works. And I know that all three of you have fantastic expertise to share here. So Kaitlin, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'll focus specifically on the unsure of how it works part. We have, since the stories that we collect are focused on our values, we've found that it's really valuable to actually build in as part of onboarding, because on day one, we're, teaching them about the organization. What are our cultural behaviors? What are our values? And we have all of these amazing stories of real Evans employees exhibiting our values and being recognized for it. So on their very first day, we send them an invite to join GoodSeeker and create an account and be able to look at all these different stories for a couple benefits. One, to actually teach them like what do our values look like in practice. And they're actually able to kind of get to know their new coworkers, because they are real stories of people doing things. So twofold benefit for them. And then everybody at Evans gets an onboarding peer when they start. And one of the things that we suggest that our onboarding peer does is to kind of show them around GoodSeeker, help them sign up if they have any questions, but then also show them how to use the tool. So we have a few stories. I'm going to share a link in a moment so you can see some of the stories that I got permission to share for this webinar that actually recognize people that made a positive impact on their onboarding experience. So I'll share that link, but that's really how we've helped to address the barrier of like, they've never used the tool before and they're just not really sure how it works. So we just help them from day one, get to know it a bit, become an author.
Fantastic. Yeah, please go ahead and share those links in the chat. And Katie, share with us your pro tips here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always try and start with the most invested, willing team that you have a relationship with. For me, it's generally been talent acquisition. They usually understand the end value of having employee stories, and they usually understand the company really well and have a lot of stories to tell. I call this priming the pump. So, go to your most engaged storytellers, get them to submit those stories into whatever tool that you're using. And then that way you can use those as examples to other storytellers down the line, showing them that all types of people from across the organization have stories to tell, they've done it, and they can do it too. I like to do campaign themes. I think making your ask specific of the employees makes it easier for them to think of a story. So if you ask for something more general, like I think there's an example on the slide, you'll see, instead of asking them about a teamwork moment, asking them about, did they meet their best friend at work and what is it like working with them? You're really honing in on the type of story that you want to collect, and it makes people easier to think of something. And then the other thing is other sourcing options. Social media, is a great place. So we actually do something that's an example post on the slide called Swag Saturdays. And it's where we ask our employees to share a story around a theme. And then we select, best one at random, whatever it is, and we reward them with swag. So that's another way for us to surface really great stories in the channels that our employees are already in. And then we can contact them afterwards and say, that was really great. I saw what you posted on Facebook or Instagram. Would you like to share it in GoodSeeker? Would you like to share it in one of our other tools? And then the other thing is new employee notes. I partner very closely with our talent acquisition team, and they have a running spreadsheet that Gloria uses. And when they talk to someone or hire someone, they'll put a note in about the person, something unique that they learned about them that they think would be a great story. And then we go through that and contact those people and say, hey, Marty said that you would have a great story about your denture experience. Would you like to tell us about it? And so that's some great ways to get it going.
Yeah, those are great ideas. I love that process suggestion of like, what did the recruiter or what does the hiring manager know about this person as they're joining the organization. Okay, and then recognition and rewards. Kaitlin, thoughts here?
Yes, this is my jam. So I actually have a background in animal training, so it's directly applicable here. I train horses. I still train horses, my own horses anyways. But it is really, really important to make sure that you are very clear on the behaviors that you're looking for and rewarding them accordingly. So like I mentioned, we tie our stories to the values because we want to be reinforcing the behaviors associated with the values, and we read those in the top 3 in the staff meeting to be recognizing the folks that are really doing a great job at that. I'd also encourage not just rewarding the content within, like, the person being recognized, but if you're implementing, like, if you've never collected stories before, incentivize the behavior of authoring the story. Like, give the authors recognition as well, because not only do you want to recognize the people being featured in the stories, but you want to reward the behavior of actually adopting the tool or authoring the story. So if there's some way to build in, like, gamification, there's kind of a point system in the back end of GoodSeeker that you can use to create some sort of gamification, making sure that you're incentivizing the behaviors that you're looking for. So yeah, not just recognizing the people in the story, but actually the person authoring the story as well. So lots of great stuff you can do with a really well thought out rewards and recognition program.
And Katie, I know you guys mentioned the swag. Anything else to add here?
Yeah, so we do the swag Saturdays. This photo actually on the slide is that was the besties story I was talking about. So Erik, I think this ties back to it doesn't have to be big. You know, a lot of things that show you insight into a company's culture can be these small everyday stories, like, who am I working with? Are these people friendly? You know, am I going to fit in? So I like to get these stories here. Like, this is my work bestie. And people like to share stuff like that. It's an easy, low barrier kind of story to get. And then this is actually out of that book that there's a picture of, the Follow the Smiles. We've been running an employee referral program, I think, like a lot of companies do. And usually there's a lot of content around, like, the financial incentive that might be, tied to that. And I was kind of like, why do we keep pushing that angle? We're still going to reward all of the referrals. I'm like, but let's remind them why they want to refer someone here. So we made this book. It's a physically printed book and a digital version. And we took all of these employee stories and we put them in there, and we're drop shipping them into the offices. It was supposed to be a small book, and it wound up being 36 pages. So we may have, we may have gone a little overboard. There's a contest in there too, talking about incentivizing. So we have our normal employee referral incentive, then we put a contest around it, and then we filled that book full of culture pieces from our employees about why you would want to refer someone here and what's so great about the company. So I think taking those opportunities to feature those stories in a lot of different channels. And again, this is that like cutting through the clutter. People have so many emails. So putting something physical together that's kind of hefty that they can pick up in their office and flip through and then be like, oh yeah, employee referral program. I think cuts through that and gives them an opportunity to see our stories in a different way.
This is awesome. Yeah, so someone had asked the question about what was the thing you mentioned in print, and, like, there it is, right? And it looks beautiful. Awesome. All right, well, let's go now to our pro tips. And if you guys have any questions, start queuing those up. So Kaitlin, tell us your top pro tips.
Yeah, lots of change management influences here. So, but definitely applicable. Tied to that big picture, the impact, like, why are we asking for stories? Why do they matter? But also, it's really, really critical in change management. If you're trying to get a behavior changed, you're trying to get those people to submit stories, that you have to make it personal. Like, why should they, as an employee, care about submitting a story? Like, what's the benefit to them? Because if there's no benefit and it just feels like extra work, probably not going to get much of a behavior change. So then again, back to the rewards and recognition, making sure that you're incentivizing the behavior that you want, both adopting the tool and submitting stories, as well as making the stories focus on behaviors that you want to reinforce, like we do at Evans with our values. So those are my top 3, although I have lots more if anyone else wants to talk.
We're going to have to tap into you for the rally blog. Okay, Katie, share with us your top pro tips.
Yeah, it's meet people where they are. That's my number one. Make it accessible and make it easy. So make sure everything that you're doing is mobile friendly. If your staff isn't in front of computers, make it through texting. If you feel like you're not initially getting a great response through your normal communication channels, try putting a social post out there, asking for your employees to share a story through social and then follow up with them after and reintroduce them to the tools. And then coach through the process. That's been really, really helpful. It might be hard. I know if you're thinking like, gosh, it's me or it's my very small team, try and just carve out a little bit of time and try and put that sort of coaching methodology to work. Like, even if it's just you coaching maybe an influence in your company through it, and then they can maybe go on and spread the word too. And so you're sort of doing that train the trainer model a little bit. And then make the request specific. This makes it easier on your storytellers. It doesn't have to be a huge life-changing story that you're asking for. It could be asking about their best friend at work. It could be asking about, what's their favorite moment throughout, a certain season. If there's something important at your company that happens, make them small stories, and that can remove the barrier there as well. And then you can work your way up to those bigger sort of, life-changing stories that you can share as well.
All right. And Erik, your top pro tips.
Yeah, I would just say, big picture and near-term goals as well. So you got a hiring plan, you got an EVP you're rolling out. I mean, you have a need for content to reinforce things and drive behavior. If you can map your story-seeking efforts to specific goals, you get buy-in, and then you can show the results. So it makes it a little bit more tangible for people. Definitely diverse contributors. So Kaitlin, I love what you're talking about. It's about the give. I mean, we built GoodSeeker with that in mind. There is no recognition unless somebody sees it and does something about it. All right. So we want to motivate the seeker to call out something. Now, what if that's an intern? What if that's somebody from a behind the scenes department? I mean, it breaks the ice in tremendous ways. So just make sure that initial group, and I would encourage it to be small to start, is diverse in all ways that you can describe diverse. All right, and last is not least is this. There's I told him I read an article last night about the anthropology of education and how hunters and gatherers manage to survive in a certain respect through sharing stories. It's a way to teach, and that people like to teach. We all kind of have the gene, and stories are teaching tools. So one way to incentivize people is to make it clear that by sharing a story, you're actually helping. It's not about the recognition always, right? That's not the reason why you're necessarily, but it can help other people succeed. Mm-hmm. And if you realize that we all have that in us, then you can find the people who want to give. I've always said GoodSeeker is about like giving stories. It's a pretty big theme, but at the end of the day, like that's what you want to tap into. And a lot of people will jump on board with that.
Great. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was fantastic. What a great topic. And I learned a bunch, and I know it's like it's touching on something that every single person out there who is trying to share the story of their company as an employer and why people would want to work at your company is feeling, because they need employees to participate. And one announcement is that our next webinar is happening on November 17th to help you with your career site upgrade. And it can be done in 6 weeks. It doesn't have to be like a multi-month project. So if you're interested in that, join us on the 17th, and then don't miss Rally Forward, which is happening on December 8th. I can't believe it's time again for Rally Forward, but we've got a great lineup for you to inspire you and with some new strategies going into 2020. So one of the questions that I saw come through, guys, was within your teams, are you guys interviewing people and writing the stories for them, or are you just depending on them to write? And what is the mix of that? So maybe Kaitlin, I'll ask that question of you.
Yeah. With my human capital management background, I always, as much as I can, want to encourage the employee to take ownership. But also with that empathy piece and what Katie mentioned, meeting people where they are, like if somebody's not comfortable doing that, and the way to do that, I would lean on Katie's coaching model probably rather than doing it for them. There was a couple instances where somebody like really did not want a social media presence, but they still wanted that person to get recognition. So I submitted the story on their behalf. But if they're fine with being on social media, I would encourage them to take ownership of that, but help them do that, right? Like don't just leave them on an island to figure it out on their own.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then here's another one. I think this one would be good for you, Katie, because you guys are so dispersed already. But this is someone's asking about, the challenges of finding those stories when employees are remote. So what's like your number one tip to help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the stories we've gathered, I don't think I've met any of those people in person. So definitely understand that struggle. I would say the same thing I said earlier about using those other channels to find stories. If you have that internal employee recognition tool, folks are using that, around the country for us. So that's a good one. Social media, again, I think is a good one when people are sharing stories and tagging any of your profiles that you might have for the employer brand side. Anything with HR, who's usually in contact with all of your employees all over the country, I would say they would be another great resource for you. That is, they're hearing things about employees out in the field to let you know and see if you can, bring some stories out of that too. So yeah, use your existing channels to try and surface them to make it a little bit easier on yourself when everyone's like out and remote and maybe not just chatting in the hallway next to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, great. And then the final question, I think this is good for you, Erik, is about organization and management. So if this person has a lot of stories that they've been collecting and they're like not organized in a very good way, do you have a tip to help really see what you have so that you can use it and optimize the usage of those stories?
Should I say use our product? That would be
No,
too big.
give them
No, I'm not kidding.
help them. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, because in retrospect, you look back and you're like, we have a ton of stories. Like, where are they? And you're scrambling to find them. And to a certain extent, it might be a little bit of an exercise of recollecting, like re-asking. And I would think of it as a way of almost it's a golden opportunity to engage people. Because half the people think you forgot, right, as an organization. So just go back and get all your story leads in a sheet, and you may have them in different forms, but actually reach back out to people and ideally centralize in one place. And I just want to say one other thing related to that too, is some early comments. And sometimes you don't have to be the writer. Like sometimes to spark a story, you need to be the asker, meaning the four of us just did a great webinar. Like, I think it was amazing. I learned a lot. Lori and Aaron, who's not even, you see his name right there. He's right there. You don't even see his face. Tremendous behind the scenes effort. Well, somebody who on this call doesn't have to be one of the five of us. Somebody can encourage Lori to write a story about Aaron. Right. So think of it that way. Like, you can enable people to be the seeker. It doesn't require them to be the writer. Because sometimes we live in our own bubbles and we don't see our successes. And it actually takes somebody kind of out of body, outside, to tell us that, hey, you should share that. So if you want to spark more stories, like, empower people to be the asker, I guess is a pro tip.
The asker. So we talked about the coach and the asker. Like, those are two great things for us to think about in our role as we want to move forward and get more stories and really scale up our storytelling program. So thank you guys so much. This was absolutely fantastic. I really did learn a lot, and I'm super appreciative that all of you were here to share your stories with the Rally Recruitment Marketing community. So thank you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and hope to see you at the next Rally webinar and event. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.